Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Rising Latterly podcast. This is Arjun Sachdev.
And this is Jay Ballou. We hope you find something here that offers you new meaning or a fresh perspective.
If you do, we encourage you to give it life,
Be bold,
experiment,
and most importantly, bring it into the interactions with the people you surround yourself with.
and see what happens. Harpreet Sahota, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, man. Happy to be here, dude. Super excited.
We're excited to have you on as well, and thank you for your time. And we want to acknowledge your presence. So I got to say that you personally have influenced me in two different ways. One in how you think, and two in how you balance your life. So let's definitely get into that, because the way you think, you're a data scientist. And the thing that impacted me the most was your ability to take something complex and start to really break it down into components. And so that's great in terms of like at work that helps you get to a solution. But I think from a life perspective, those are like the 2 seconds that somebody may need in their mind in terms of running the algorithm that allows them to say something that they will not regret in the future. So I just think that breaking down of something complex to something more manageable in a data science way resonated with me. And then the other thing is just getting to know you a little bit, knowing that you're balancing your regular job with a budding podcast, which we're definitely going to talk about, with all the mentoring that you do. And on top of that, you're also a husband and a father. So all of that we'll definitely get into. But why don't we start with your story and how you actually got into data science?
Yeah, so I got into data science. I mean, officially, I've had the job title data scientist for about 2 years. But prior to that, I was a biostatistician. And then prior to that, I was an actuary. And then prior to that, I was a grad student in mathematics and statistics. I mean, data science is nothing more than just computer science collided with math and statistics. So the path to here it was windy, but it was still in a single lane, if that makes sense. So I initially got really, really interested in math. Wasn't until I started teaching it to high school students. So for a couple of years, I was a small group math instructor at what was called it was almost like a continuation school. I mean, you guys are from California-ish, so you probably heard of this concept of continuation school. This is a school that kids went to once they got kicked out of continuation school. And it was academic recovery was what it was called. And
Wow.
I took this job up. This was 2008 when I had to take the job up. And that's 2008 was the
Yeah.
it was a bad year.
Financial crisis.
It was a bad year. And I took that job because there really wasn't any other jobs available at that time. And it was through explaining stuff to these kids who didn't understand math that I started to really appreciate it myself more. And I was like, shit, this is really interesting.
Wow.
What careers did I do in math? And I found out about this career called actuary, mostly because apparently they made a shit ton of money. And I didn't realize how hard the path to become an actuary was. But then once I made my mind up, I just stuck to it. And that led me to grad school and a bunch of other adventures along the way. But culminated in me becoming a data scientist.
Nice. Are you a Rubik's Cube guy?
Nah, dude, I suck at Rubik's Cube. Yeah. I actually, I'm not that good at Rubik's Cube, but you know what? This is interesting because the way when I talk to like business stakeholders and they ask what it is that I do, it's like, all right, well, imagine a Rubik's Cube. It's all scrambled, all messed up, right? Your guys' data is like that. And it's my job to take that data and kind of massage it into place so that it's nice and clean and neat. So then I can build a model on top of that to, quantify the relationship between, these features and the target variable, but that's getting too technical. But yeah, I kind of like to think about working with data, like working with the Rubik's Cube.
Interesting. So actually, where do you think right now data science is being used the most?
Everywhere. I mean,
Yeah, definitely everywhere. But like specifically, where should it be focused? Because I mean, you can be like, website recommendations. It could be like your YouTube recommendations. It could be advertising that's targeted. Um, maybe it's used in terms of like protecting us from the next pandemic. I mean,
Internet of Things as well.
Yeah, I think it's really used a lot in, I've seen it mostly blow up in terms of like social media and e-commerce. Just anything that has just a vast amount of data collected on a per customer level that allows us to understand the way this person behaves through their interactions with some website. That's where I think will have the biggest impact, or that's where it is having the biggest impact.
So as I understand it, storing data and then running analytics on it have traditionally been different sort of capabilities. I think we're producing, petabytes and petabytes of data every day as a world, and I came across statistics that said we're going to generate 30 times the amount of data in 2020 than we were in 2010. I imagine it might even be higher than that. Do you think it's possible for the analytics to catch up to the run rate of data creation? Like, are we actually going to be able to use all of the data we're creating in a constructive way?
With enough computation power, probably, yeah. But that's where the data science comes in, because when we have that much data, then we have to come up with some strategic way to sample it, um, so that we can get an accurate representation of actual reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that is one of the big challenges, because there is so much data, but computation speed, even though it has grown tremendously in the short amount of time we've had it, we need to have strategies to make sense of all this huge data. And I mean, just sampling strategies is one way to work around that.
Gotcha.
so then in terms of some of the complex problems that you specifically are working on, what are they? Or maybe you're mentoring your mentees through certain situations.
Hmm. So you mean problems in terms
Yeah,
of?
like what are some day-to-day things that you're working on right now?
So right now, biggest thing I'm doing at work is essentially we've got this relationship with people who sell our products, right? And these people who sell our products are able to sell not at the list price, but at a negotiated discount rate, right? And every now and then, one of our representatives would want to sell a product that is lower than that negotiated discount rate. So they're asking for a discount on top of the discount.
Mm.
And this process of reviewing the details of this sales request is done manually right now by high level people in the organization. And biggest thing I've been working on in the company is, okay, how do we make this easier for them? So we've got a couple of years worth of data, and essentially looking at that data and coming up with a suggested discount rate.
Hmm.
So at a high level, that's one thing that I'm working on at work.
So it's interesting because I think one of the uh, fascinating parts about data science is that it's going to be a part of what we do in everything moving forward. As you said, it's being used everywhere. But I think it's also bringing like different worlds together now, which may not have collaborated in the past or interacted in the past. And there's like different technologies and different capabilities that are like cross-pollinating with each other. Like what are you seeing in terms of the worlds actually colliding like that? And like how even for people, like their jobs, what they can do, like that will extend. It's just going to continue to extend and evolve, and more capabilities and new impacts are going to be like derived from the data world and the analytics world, and as they continue to come closer together.
Any job where you use a spreadsheet that contains data, like data science can help with that, right?
Mm.
It could be anything from helping you automate that process that you're doing in your spreadsheet by just doing, coming up with some programs that do that, or just making it more efficient for you to parse through all that data. But if you think about it, if you have a job that involves you using a spreadsheet to do something with numbers, you can probably use the help of a data scientist in some respect.
Yeah, so in my own work experience, I've seen kind of a growing disconnection between engineers or data scientists, like the tech folks, the way they think about a solution and the way that the business stakeholders might think about a solution. I think there are a lot of non-technical folks out there that kind of pride themselves on their people skills and pride themselves on their ability to like pitch product and communicate effectively. But do you think we'll get to a point as these solutions become more complicated where non-technical people, the business stakeholders, are going to need to learn more about data scientists or need to learn a little bit of code or something like that, just so everyone is living in the same universe and using the same language?
I think as a data scientist, you are the bridge between the business folk and the technical people. That's why data scientists are so valuable. You have to have the duality mindset where you can understand a business problem, a business situation, and then turn around and translate that into a quantitative problem, into a data science problem, and work with the technical people to come up with the solution that satisfies the business need, right? So as a data scientist, you have this duality mindset. At least if you hope to be a successful data scientist. If you're just a data scientist that is just focused entirely on technical stuff, you probably won't get past the individual contributor level. You might be a high level individual contributor, but you'll max out there. So data scientists definitely have to have that duality mindset, connecting business and technical people together. Now, in terms of just the general public learning any type of tech skills, like definitely, you're only going to benefit from that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, that must make it pretty interesting being able to kind of live and work with your feet in both camps. It's cool to be able to be the kind of medium between both parties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the other cool thing about it is that you have to do a lot more with less. You have to be able to like really communicate the simplest possible explanation when you're the middleman or, you know, the data scientist, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the challenge is trying to, I mean, you have to use analogies. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Like anytime I communicate with somebody, my goal is hopefully to, especially in a business setting, is that I want the person to feel smart after I talk to them, not because it's like, oh my God, he's so smart, but I want them to feel like, oh my God, yes, I understand it so much. I could even be a data scientist. Right. So that's kind of the approach you have to have. I mean, to be successful, really, right? Like if you can't communicate your ideas in such a way that anybody can understand them, then what's the point of doing what
Yeah,
you're
right.
doing, right? Like it's not going to get used, right? Like
Right.
if nobody understands what it is that you're doing, nobody's going to want to use it.
And you found analogy and like metaphor to be a pretty powerful way to get there.
Yeah, or just trying to lead them down a train of thought, right? Using some language devices like, oh, think of it this way, or look at it from this perspective, or imagine this, right? Like trying to get them to understand. I mean, it's hard and it takes a lot
Yeah.
of effort. So usually like anytime I have a meeting with any stakeholders, I will spend maybe a half a day before that meeting just going over everything that I plan on saying and stripping away every technical detail, but periodically pausing while I'm giving that explanation. Like if you need more detail, let me know. I can unhide slides and get right into it, right? So you don't want to talk to people like they're dumb, obviously, but you want to talk to them in such a way that you want them to feel smarter and understand what you're doing, because that's how you get buy-in.
Yeah, you
Totally.
don't want to confuse people.
No,
And if they can explain it to someone else, then they get it. And
exactly.
you're giving them the language to basically use. So you're like writing them the script of how to explain it to someone else. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
So
interesting.
tell us a little about tell us a little bit about your podcast. It's the Artists of Data Science podcast. I know that it's dude, your last episode with Annie Duke was awesome for several reasons.
Yeah.
Number one, the fact that she's Annie Duke.
Yeah.
And if you know that name rings a bell, it's because you were watching poker on TV in the 2000s. That's why.
Yep.
and
Yep. Yeah.
and
Her book changed my life, man. Thinking in Bets, like that book literally changed my psychology in very profound ways. I can't even begin to articulate. But yeah, it was cool to get an opportunity to speak with her.
Were there one or two rules or ideas from that book that you might be able to distill down for the audience, or was it pretty complicated?
No, I think it's pretty easy to understand. The biggest takeaway I had from it that still just shakes me to my core right now is to think about the future not as a certainty, but as a probability distribution, right? Um, so you begin to think of your actions. I mean, a lot of people just think, okay, if I take action B, then action C will occur, right? But
Right.
really, it's action C has X probability of occurring if I take this action. And there's actually 6 other things that might unfold, each with their own probability of occurring based on this action, right? So if I look at the action I'm about to take and I compute the expected value of the outcome, which one should I take? Right?
Wow.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really, really,
absolutely.
it's called like Bayesian psychology. So yeah, that was really interesting. And it really just opens you up to you start thinking more about your cognitive biases and things like that a lot more.
Totally. I could see you could start playing that game with everything in terms of like what would be my expected market value 5 years from now if I take this job, or how would this decision impact a relationship or impact, my following on social media. Like I could see how you would want to start running all your decisions through that kind of probability distribution. That's fascinating.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, there's only one past, right? The past is fixed, it is done, but the future is like multivariate, right? The future is, there's not a defined future. And just thinking about, just acknowledging that is, it just, to me, it just really shook my psychology in a very good way. Um, Mostly because, I'm a statistician um, by training, and I never thought about life in this way. That the future is just a probability distribution.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and we can definitely dig into it. I want to say, it's interesting because when you were talking to Annie about that, the example that you were talking about was around applying for jobs. And so, you know, you're trying to apply to this one job, but you have to think to yourself, you're one of 100 people that are doing the same thing. You don't also know what that hiring manager on the other end is going through or what they're experiencing, or you don't know any of the variables.
Mhm.
So your only way of actually landing the job you want is by sending out applications and not just fixating on one or two jobs that you think you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was huge for me because I would go in for an interview and I just be like, oh, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it, right? Like I just know it. I'm gonna get this job. But actually, no, it's not true. Because there is an infinite number of things that could happen, right? First of all, I'm one of X number of people applying for the job. So right off the bat, like that's a baseline probability. If there's 100 people applying for the job and I am one person out of that 100, as soon as I hit submit on that, I have a 1% chance of getting that job, right?
Yeah.
So as you go along the process, you can update your probability of getting that job. Okay, I had the phone interview and the phone interview went well. They're calling me back for a interview with the hiring manager. All right, cool. So let me update my probability of me landing this job. Now, you, you have to remove outcome from the process, right? Like, which means that I could have a great interview on the second round, right? And I can control everything that is within my control, right? Optimizing the way that I present my resume, my answers, being respectful, articulate, right? But there's X number of factors that are outside my control, right? So I need to temper my probability estimate of me landing the job because of these unknown factors, right? So even if I get called back for a second interview, it's not like it's a 50% chance of me getting the job now. Updated reasonably, maybe it's like a 5 to 7% chance that I'll land this job because it could be that maybe I came in there and I was wearing my Old Spice deodorant, and the hiring manager caught a whiff of that and it reminded her of an ex-boyfriend. And now all of a sudden she associates that person with me and just doesn't like me, right? Like
Yeah.
shit like that can happen. I
Yeah.
can't control that. Like I really can't control any of that whatsoever. So I focus on what it is that is within my control, optimize for it, but then adjust my optimism accordingly.
Mm-hmm. And does it make you diversify your bets more in life, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, definitely diversify in what way?
In the sense that instead of saying, okay, I think the interview went well, I'm feeling good about it, I feel like I got this job, if you actually, stress tested and say, realistically, I probably only have a 50 to 30% chance of getting this job if there's still two other candidates, does that make you want to, ensure that you're, even if you feel things are going well, that in this example of job interviewing, you would still pursue other job interviews just to kind of diversify your bets?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and I really like the name of your podcast too, The Artist of Data Scientists. I think it kind of hits on like the art and science thing. What were you trying to kind of convey with that title?
So Seth Godin has this book called Linchpins, and in Linchpins he defines somebody. Um, he defines this concept of an artist, and really, artist is not just somebody with a paintbrush, and it's not just somebody writing a book. It's anybody who pours themselves into their work and delivers with. He calls it emotional labor. Who puts that emotional labor into their work, and it's somebody who's just unique in the way that they execute. So the artist of data science is actually just my listeners, right? My listeners, if they are listening to my podcast, there's something that separates them from all the other data scientists for sure,
Mm.
because I'm not talking about the same type of shit that other data science podcasts are. So the fact that they are here with me and hearing my show, but that makes them artists already, right?
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a mindset. I love that.
Mhm.
Wait, so of all the interviews that you've had, like what are some patterns or what are like the biggest takeaways that you've kind of experienced with your guests in terms of like the sameness? What are people saying in your sphere of your network?
Man, that's a hard question because I interview so many different types of people. Like I've interviewed several authors of various different books, and then also a bunch of data scientists. So yeah, man,
So
that's a
like
tough
from a
question.
philosophy perspective, like
Yeah,
what's the type of mindset what's the type of mindset you live with? What's the type of mindset they're living with? Like what's the mindset?
yeah. So as a data scientist, you are forever learning. You're a lifelong learner if you're a data scientist, just because of the nature of the job, right? Technology changes, methodology changes. No problem statement is ever the same. It might look the same on the surface, but it's not. And you have to you'll come up very, very frequently uh, situations where like, fuck, man, I don't know this. Like, I can't, this shit's fucking difficult, right?
Yeah.
But you have to approach it with, all right, cool. It's difficult, but I've solved hard problems before, right? I've solved several difficult problems. I could figure this one out as well. So it's more that growth mindset in the sense that, all right, cool, this is a challenge. It's hard. Um, I might not know how to do it yet, but give me a little bit of time and I will figure this out.
And is that a big part of the first step in approaching or in developing a solution is just defining the problem really clearly? Like, is that kind of labor in itself, just making sure the parameters of the problem statement are dialed in?
That's the most important part of solving any problem is first, what the fuck am I trying to solve? Right?
Mm,
Like
yeah.
what is actually the problem here? Because stakeholders will come to you and they'll have some vague problem, right? But really, once you start pressing on it, it's like, all right, well, your question is not actually your question. There's another question behind that, and that's the one that we need to answer. So
Mm.
yeah, defining the problem is the most important part of the step.
And what might a problem look like in terms of like its level of granularity? Like when you've fully fleshed it out, is it like a sentence long or is it like, a page long?
I mean, really depends on the situation. Like everything in data
Hmm.
science, it
Yeah.
depends. Um, I mean, it could be anything from, like, for example, like, oh, I need to figure out why numbers are down this month. All
Mm.
right, well, that's a vague question.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean why? In what, like, in a particular location with a particular type of client? Were you running
Mm,
like some sales? Like, what are you talking about? There's reality is complex, right? So to identify the problem and all the different moving parts, right? You need to really ask great questions, and it's rarely ever just like a one sentence thing. It might be definitely more than that.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Reality is complex. I love that. And that's pretty interesting because the reality moving forward is something that I know Jay and I have been talking about. Like, we're in the camp that in 2021, dude, it is going to be really, really hard to decipher what is true and what's not, even more. So people are already struggling with, like, quote unquote fake news and all that stuff. So from your perspective, with like AI, machine learning, data, analytics, you know, where what's what's the situation looking like in terms of all of that coming together as a technology and really confusing us as humans?
Yeah, that's scary, especially because of social media, deep fakes, fake news, bad actors, like them Russian spies out there. Hopefully, there's no Russians listening to this podcast, but yeah, it's definitely scary, right? Because AI is getting advanced, and you've seen some of these deep fakes, man. They're really, really scary. And I mean, there's somebody on my podcast, Chase Cunningham, did an episode with him on cybersecurity, and he had this concept of kinetic outcomes, that the stuff we do digitally, right, can cause people to take action in the real world, and that
Yeah.
is scary, right? Like, you can send out a deep fake of somebody saying some really vulgar shit, and that could fire up a segment of the population to the point where they get up out of their basements and go outside in the real world and do terrible, terrible things.
Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of Peter Thiel's idea of like advancements in the world of bits versus the world of atoms, and he
Mm.
said that in the last 20 years, 20 odd years, we've made so much progress in the world of bits and so little progress in the world of atoms. Like there hasn't been a big physical invention that's really reshaped the world yet, but we've made all this progress in information technology, and it seems like at least in the last 5 years, given the way social media has gone and the way that the algorithms are pushing people deeper into like echo chambers, and as you mentioned, this whole new threat of deepfakes, it seems like our progress in information technology might be our undoing. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, especially if it's used in bad ways, right? Um, Social media, for example, like the amount of data they're able to collect on us, and like the echo chambers, we put ourselves in these echo chambers by virtue of our interactions with content online, right? Like, what you do online feeds the algorithm metrics on your behavior, which then it passes through the algorithm and determines what to show you, right? So it becomes super easy to put yourself in an echo chamber that way. Um, Best way to break out of that is just start looking at things that you don't normally look at, right? Like, start following people you don't normally follow. Don't just take an article as truth. Try to find the counter argument to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
And no one actually saw this coming, like the data marketplace being such a commodity. It's so easy to talk about it now, but back in the day, no one really thought about it as becoming a commodity. And by 2022, 35% of large organizations will be either sellers or buyers of data via online marketplaces. That's up from 25% in 2020. So it's just going to grow. And it's like, how do we know that we have the right people in place to stop this from going the wrong way? And the way I'm thinking about it is there's so much money involved already. It's like the pharmaceutical companies, they want to keep making money by feeding you pills and putting you on drugs. Well, the folks behind the scenes here, if we don't have the right ones in place, maybe just continue to drive these analytics that drive us all kind of insane because of what the social media algorithms are doing to a lot of us. So I just want to, like, maybe no one knows the answer to this question, but it's like, how do we know who's in place and if they're the right people in place to stop that from happening. Otherwise, this goes bad pretty quickly.
And by right people, you mean right data scientists in place?
Right data scientists or the right people, like ethically, and like the fact that you can't treat the human mind as something that we're just going to make money off of if we corrupt it more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question, man. Like, how do we know who's going to be responsible for the outcomes? I think definitely data scientists should, or whoever's machine learning engineers, whoever is building the algorithms, needs to be cognizant of the fact that the work we're doing can impact people adversely. But oftentimes we're so deep in the trenches, we just care about making our algorithm perform well, right? We
That's
care
what I'm
about the
saying.
accuracy metrics. We care about,
Mm-hmm.
do we get this person to do what we want, type of thing, right? um, it's going to be up to, maybe not the individual contributor should take it upon themselves, right? For sure, right? Like if you're a data scientist and all you care about is your accuracy metrics without thinking about how this is affecting the real world, that's scary, right? But you have to take it upon yourself. Second guess what it is that you're doing. Think about what you're doing. Think about the consequences. But the right people in place, man, like, I mean, that's, how can you ever tell you have the right people anywhere, right? I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
that's a tough
totally.
question. Yeah.
And when the incentives are, you look at something like the YouTube algorithm that Tristan Harris unpacked in Social Dilemma, the problem statement, it seems that the data scientists were facing when they constructed that algorithm was just how do we get people to click the recommended video? Like that was sort of the entirety of what they were solving for without thinking about the human impact or the kinetic impact. And if that's what, you know, if that's the entirety of what they're going for, then there will obviously be negative side effects. So maybe it's a matter of getting the incentives right, or maybe it's a matter of more regulation, or as you said, just individual contributors making a statement with their own work. But yeah, to Arjun's point, it's a crazy uphill battle. It looks like we're facing.
Yeah, because I mean, when you're working on the algorithm, it's not like we know what the content of the thing that the person is clicking on is about, right? It's all just they're all just, I mean, simplified. They're all just columns in a data set to us, right? We don't know that video A is about, you know, promoting racism, things like that, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, it's there's got to be some segment of people working in social media outside of the group of data scientists who actually audit the data scientists. I think that needs to be something that happens going forward. Just like there's auditing practices for accountants. Like, I mean, I don't know much about accounting, but I know there's a field called auditing, and they audit the work that accountings
Yeah.
do, right?
Yeah.
So we need something similar to that, I think, in data science, especially for people who are working in social media companies.
Yeah.
Um, like, I
It's a
mean,
little
there's a
bit
lot of
more
data,
oversight.
yeah, there's a lot of data scientists out there. Like for me, like nothing I do deals with people at all, right? Like I just, like, nothing that I do affects you guys, right? Like, but the
Mm-hmm.
people that are working at Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, right, who actually have influence over the population at large, like, I think it might, I mean, I think it might be a good idea, right, to have
Yeah.
Yeah,
Little
some type of
definitely.
oversight
auditing in place.
for sure. It's the way you think. It's pretty, deep. Clearly, Uh, did this lead you? Being in this field, did that lead you towards like your interest in Stoic philosophy? Because I know that's something that you're into as well. Or did you already have that, and then you were kind of exposed to this world that you do on a day to day? Like, where did your philosophy develop from?
Yeah, I mean, definitely has nothing to do with data science. Like, I think data science is like the least interesting part about me.
Word.
Like, like real. I mean, I get paid to be a data scientist, but I mean, I don't define myself as a data scientist. I'm much more than that. But to be honest, like the thinking in bets, like the concepts in that book, um, they started planting seeds in my mind, And as those seeds started to grow, and as I started just research more and more stuff, I realized that the thoughts that I was having due to that book were actually parallel to Stoic philosophy. And
Mm.
Wow.
and I talked about that with Annie Duke during the interview. I was like, I asked her how much of her work was influenced by Stoic philosophy, and she was like, "Oh, quite a lot." And I was like, "All right, well, that makes complete sense." But I guess to answer your question, being a data scientist does not affect my life's philosophy at all. My philosophy of life just came from I just needed a guide. You know what I mean? Like just something to help train and discipline my character, I guess.
But what does Stoic philosophy mean to you in terms of how you think about it and how it manifests in your life?
Yeah, so Stoic philosophy, it's really interesting, 2,000-year-old philosophy, and I think it boils down to, and oversimplifying it, but it's just the realization that, okay, there are things that are within your control and things that are outside of your control. The things that are outside of your control are essentially everything that doesn't happen inside your head, right? So if you can't control anything on the outside, you might be able to influence them, but you can't control them. So why worry about those, right? So focus on training your mind, disciplining your mind, not letting it become overcome by anger, by passions, by just bad thoughts, right? So training your character to observe an event and not be triggered, right? So you can observe an
Mm-hmm.
event, you'll have some initial response, but you don't have to go with that initial response. You can pause, evaluate, and then choose a different route.
So hard to do.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, I'm not good at it. I mean, getting better, but it's definitely played a huge um it's just been driving force for me this year, I guess. I picked it up mostly because I was never given like a blueprint for life. I mean, like I was never given a life's philosophy, and I had a son this year, and I knew that it what I had didn't work for me, right? Like it took me forever to figure this out, 30 plus years, 35 plus years. So I needed to find something for myself that I could then share with my son, right? A set of beliefs, a set of guiding principles to help you through all the ups and downs that you're going to face in life. So that's been the biggest,
Yeah.
biggest reason why I've just delved really deep into that philosophy.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's
Yeah. It's sorry. You go ahead, Arjun.
no, I was gonna say that's like the breakdown of like you can take a complex thought and break it into individual components, and also in terms of like controlling your inner world versus the outer world. Um, all that is like the type of shift in perspective that I was talking about at the beginning. And I'm interested in like this is probably forcing you to act it out. And again, we're all practicing this, and we want to get to a better level each day. But it's like if you're doing it for your kid, then you actually have to live it, because you can say things to a child and that doesn't mean they're going to follow it. It's what did they see that they're going to follow. And so it puts the accountability back on your plate, which is kind of intense when you think about that specific philosophy, which like a lot of it has to do a little bit, or actually a little bit has to do with accountability.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Aurelius has the quote, "Spend no more time thinking about what a good man is, just be one."
Mm.
Right. So just live the philosophy. Um, you know, don't I guess don't talk about it, be about it. I guess. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, seems to be kind of a philosophy of moderating your emotions. Does that mean giving up a little bit of like the upside when you're going through a period where things are going well? Like, do you kind of have to bring yourself down so you're not as passionate in your anger or in your like stress levels on the downslope? You know what I mean? Is it kind of like living in kind of the
Sense
middle
of,
point of life?
yeah, equanimity, right? So
Right, right, right.
obviously, like lowercase stoicism s gets a mixed up with the philosophy of stoicism, right? Stoicism is not about suppressing all of your emotions. You feel your emotions. You should, right? They're an essential part of being human, but they should never overcome your rationality or reason or your sense of reason, right? You shouldn't be overcome with passion that leads you to, you move to action by your passions or you move to action by your anger. Like that you should not do, right?
Got
So
it.
pause, think, all right, and then act.
That makes sense.
What are you playing on repeat right now in terms of music?
Oh man, my Akira the Don, man, that's my guy. So Akira the Don, he's got some awesome stuff, man. He takes talks by amazing people, cuts them up, puts them to a beat, and just makes fire albums out of them. So, for example, he took a bunch of interviews with David Goggins, put them to beats, and made a David Goggins album. He took 2,000-year-old text, the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, and made that into an album. And
Wow.
so that's been
That's
on repeat
cool.
for me. Yeah, that's been on repeat for me a lot. A lot of Akira the Don, but specifically, I mean, this week it's been "Taking Souls" by David Goggins. That's been my shit. Yeah,
Nice. He did one. Do you think he did one with Jordan Peterson as well? Am
yeah,
I thinking of the
yeah,
right person? Yeah.
yeah. He does a lot with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is interesting, man. Like sometimes it's like he just says shit, and I'm like, dude, just because nobody can understand how you speak doesn't necessarily mean that what you're saying is deep, right?
Mm.
Like you just sometimes just like word salad. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man?
Yeah. Yeah. I've gotten a lot out of him over the years. I mean, I think he's actually kind of been out of commission the past year. He's had some health issues, but I think in his heyday before he got famous, like if you go back and listen to his lectures from like 2015 and 2016, when there wasn't so much pressure on him to project a certain like public image. I got the most out of those lectures because that was just him, in a classroom with like 30 kids as some obscure professor. So
Yeah, man. He's gotten a bad rap lately, but I don't understand why. Like they try to say that he's like a spokesman for the far right, and I'm like, I don't necessarily see that, man. Like, yeah,
yeah, no, I'm with you. I don't see him fitting that bill either. There's definitely things you can criticize him for, but yeah, I think it's an unfair characterization to say his following is all, far right wackos. Just doesn't really hold together in reality.
You know what's interesting about that whole spectrum of people? It's like there's a lot going on, and no matter what they say, whether it's him, whether it's Sam Harris, whether it's Eric Weinstein, these folks, Lex Friedman, it doesn't matter what they say. Like people are attacking them for things, and there's like they'll go on like Twitter battles with people arguing their philosophy. And it's like come to a point, it's like, well, do you even want to be one of these figures? Like, do you actually want to put yourself out there? Because you're just gonna get smoked.
yeah, man. It's hard, man. Like, I mean, I try to avoid crowds, try to avoid because I mean, look, man, like Seneca has this quote about the crowds. He's like, I avoid the crowds because, I mean, I don't know what they think, and I don't. Oh man, I lost the quote. It's on top of my head. I'll have to look it up. But it's a quote about how crowds can just twist you, right? And they can just make you think something that you don't want to think. Yeah, it's interesting.
For sure. Well, what you're I have your own podcast now, so you're speaking, in a public forum. Have you ever found yourself in situations where you've gotten into territory that you didn't want to wade into, or you worried about having certain comments on the public record, or because you are sort of performing for the crowd in some way now, and that's something Arjun and I are dealing with as well. I'm just curious if you have any experience with that on your end.
I mean, good thing for editing software, right? Because if I go back and listen
Yeah.
to it, I'm like, all right, maybe I shouldn't let that creep out. Then I'll edit it out. Um,
Yeah.
but in general, man, like I'm not really too worried about it. I just keep it real, right? Like I just try to be authentic to myself, right? So these are my fucking thoughts, right? This is what I think, and I'm sharing them. If you don't like them, that is not my problem because I don't think my thoughts for you to like, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think them and speak them, and how you take them, that is your issue, right? Like I can't control how anybody's going to react to anything that I say, so I don't even worry about it. Um, but I do just try to make sure that what I do say is at least valuable in some way to someone.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, I feel like part of the I feel like you need to make a decision that you're not going to like apologize for saying anything that you're genuinely not sorry for. So it's like if you actually do say something that, you know, you feel was wrong, I'm not saying you should never apologize. You should own up to it if you feel a genuine, you know, authentic kind of guilt. But I feel like a lot of situations right now, people are just sort of bending to the knee to the mob and apologizing for things they still actually kind of believe in, which you know, isn't good. To your point, I think, you know, you want to be able to speak your mind, and if you stand by something, you know, when you said it, you know, continue to stand by it and own it. It's really, I think, a better way to go through life.
Yeah, man, I don't get why people get worked up about what other people think or say. You know what I mean? Like, why is that an issue? Like, why am I going to get worked up about what somebody thinks or says? I mean, obviously, if it has, you know, the barring all extreme cases, right? But in general, right? If I say something, if I think something and I share it with somebody, like, what the fuck, man? Like, who cares, right? Like, it's just my thought. You could either take it, you can agree with it, disagree with it, whatever. Like, it's not a big deal. Life will go on, right? But there's just, it seems, just people out there who just who just get off on that shit, right? Who just love starting shit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, there's so many elements to that because it's like people. Yeah, I just think that like there's an awareness to be able to say something like that, you know, and like we're lucky to be able to be aware to be able to be like, oh, you know, ignore what people are saying and don't take it personally, or why is that affecting your thoughts? But dude, the systems that are in place, they're all designed for like a human to not be able to really deal with them. So in terms of like the feedback that people get all their life, it takes a lot of time to become aware to just ignore that and like move on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do wonder how I would react to a situation if I said something that people found offensive and I had like, you know, 100,000 people mobbing me on Twitter. I wonder if I would take back my comments about, you know, apologizing, because to Arjun's point, you know, we do grow up feeling this tremendous social pressure our whole life. And I can literally only imagine what it must feel like when you have like 100,000 people going after you. You know, even if it's only in the digital world, it still must feel kind of painful or stressful in some way.
Yeah, I guess just don't say dumb shit, right? Like, if you're saying shit with the intention to incite people or get people pissed off, then you're bringing that on yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, don't say shit with the intention of firing people up, because that could backfire, right? You might get
Totally,
100,000
yeah.
people fired up. But in general, like, I mean, just sharing thoughts in general, right? Like that, anything I say on this podcast can be taken out of context by somebody for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
Somebody can be like, "Oh, your description of stoicism is wrong, fucking asshole. That's what you doing, right?" And then they might start blasting me all over social media. But then it's like, all right, dude, like, relax, man. It's not that big a deal. But if I start firing off at the mouth some just complete nonsense, then yeah, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, a different story for sure.
I have to ask you a question. I mean, you're up in Canada right now, but you're from California. What was it like sitting in Canada watching the US election? Tuesday, the 3rd through the 7th was a long ass day, dude.
Yeah,
How did
yeah. I was refreshing like the news several times a day, just trying to get a count on the electoral votes. But
So was there strong interest from like folks in Canada? Obviously, I mean, I feel like the world was watching, but what were the thoughts with Canadians?
I mean, talking to people at work, everybody was kind of interested in it. I mean, U.S. is pretty big deal in the world. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really talk to too many other Canadians about it. People were definitely following it, definitely watching it. Everybody was hoping that Trump would be elected out, and it looks like that happened. So
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say Trump would be elected for a second. I was like, what?
no, elected out, voted out.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah,
voted out.
yeah. No, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, It's been quite a week. It's been quite a 4 years. That is for sure.
Yeah, no, I remember when he got elected in 2016, man. Like I was physically sick. Like I could not go to work the next day. I was like, this is just disgraceful. Like it was bizarre. And I'm glad he's out, man. Glad he's out.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the day, dude, I mean, there's clearly division in the country. I actually think that there could be possibility for more unity. Like, it's okay to be divided. It's okay to get a couple of things done from both sides. Okay, they may not be as big as you would like for example, a stimulus package may not be as big as you like, but at least there'll be one. Like, I think there actually could be some growth from this. And I think we all have a right to be pissed if nothing happens again. If nothing happens again, then it's just like so in your face politics that it's just like that might lead to a revolt. But if somehow there could be unity right now, that is going to be amazing. And the future could actually look brighter as a result of how divided we are today.
I love that,
Yeah,
man. That's beautiful.
yeah. Joe, that reminds me of Joe Biden's line, I think, from this week. He said, "The purpose of our politics isn't total, unrelenting, unending warfare." It's true. Like it's weird. We've turned to politics, I think, for entertainment in the 1990s and 2000s and the kind of Fox News era when mainstream media started to get kind of polarized between like left and right. But now it's become this religious fixation for people. I've had conversations with people that are diehard Trump supporters, and it's more than just a politician for them. It's become so much more than just political discourse. It's like fulfilling some kind of religious function in people's lives right now.
Yeah, man. That's don't even follow like the politics, man. Like it's
Nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
like real
Yeah,
talk,
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
I guess that's part of how I just get shit done. It's just like just focus on on the things that I know are going to impact my day-to-day stuff. So it's like, all right, I'm not even going to worry about these idiots talking about stupid shit
Yeah, yeah,
people
yeah,
say.
yeah. No, it's all good. I know what you mean, though. It's
Yeah.
like control what you can control, and at the end of the day, it shouldn't interfere in what your goal is for your life that you are living. You're the only one who is in charge of this thing, right? So you do it the way you want to do it, and that's what I'm saying. It's such a sideshow, the whole political thing, that like I hope that out of this we actually can be more united. But anyway, um, so just getting off politics, Harpreet, I know you're like a super avid reader. What's a book you're reading right now, or what's like the best book you read in the last month or so?
Man, so right now I'm reading Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. So this is a real good book, Law of Human Nature. This is the concise version, but I got the full audio version, listening to that as well. My favorite book this year is The Serendipity Mindset. That book
Okay.
is really good. Highly recommend that, by Dr. Christian Busch. I got a chance to interview him on the podcast as well. And that's about the science and art of creating good luck. So it's a really interesting book.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed that book.
What'd you take away
What's
from
the
that?
The biggest thing is you keep an open mind, right? It's interesting, right? Because you make your own luck, right? You actually make your own luck by the actions you take and observing what happens in the world, right? So, for example, our mutual friend Pankaj, right? He mentioned your name in passing, right? When I was on a conversation with him. What did I do? I looked you up on LinkedIn and I added you, right? And after I added you on LinkedIn, we've had what, 3, 4, 5 conversations, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's culminated in you coming on my show and me coming on your show, right? So we've created these opportunities for ourselves by keeping an open mind and being perceptive, right? And just seeing how things can connect together, right? So connecting dots, so finding opportunities, right? Like, for example, with the podcast, like I interviewed somebody, Dr. Camilla Pang, and when I interviewed her, in order to get her book, I had to talk to her publicist, right? And I could have just left it at that. Could have just spoke to her publicist, got a copy of her book, and just whatever, gone on about my day. But me keeping an open mind and thinking, okay, cool, I got the email address now, the publicist. Chances are this, you're not only Camille Pang's publicist, you're probably publicists of other authors as well. So let me reach out and see if you have anybody else on your roster that you can connect me with, right? And that's culminated
Nice.
in a number of different people coming onto my show, right? So had I been just so myopic and focused on just getting the book and doing my thing, I wouldn't have opened my mind to that possibility, right? So it's keeping your mind open to connections and thinking about how different things can fit together and making that a habit.
Literally constant shifts in perspective and just finding connections in between different silos, different verticals. It's exactly why we created this podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, you guys will enjoy that book, man. Definitely check it out.
Absolutely. And was that the science or the art of creating good fortune and good luck in your life? That piece of it? Just kind of both.
I think so. I think the science part of it is the psychological process, right? You thinking in a particular way. That might be the science aspect of it, and the art of it is how you make the connections happen, right? So the science is your brain, the art is your action.
Right. I like that. I really like that.
Awesome. So I know we're coming up on an hour here, coming up close to the end. So I want people who are listening to this podcast to subscribe to Harpreet's podcast, The Artist of Data Scientist. Follow him on LinkedIn because he actually does put a lot of great content out there. And if you are a data scientist listening to this and you're interested in any sort of mentorship, register. He has open office hours as well.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah, definitely check us out. We're on all the platforms. Find me on LinkedIn. And if you want to register for open office hours, you don't even need to be a data scientist. Like if you just want to come for career advice, mentorship, just talk about shit, come just bit.ly.com/ADSOH. You can register for the open office hours that way.
Awesome.
Nice, man. Well, appreciate it, Harpreet. Appreciate the conversation and talk to you soon.
Right on, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Harpreet.